Our YouTube stream is live, and we will officially start our morning coffee. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to STrEAM Academy's morning coffee. I'm Adam Mickelson, your principal, and we have a couple of guests on today. We have one of our APC members, Jen Mickelson, who also works for Migrant Ed, and she's going to talk about Migrant Ed programs in the show today. But first, we have a really special guest that I'm really excited to introduce. I think in times of crisis and difficulty, really I'm reminded that you learn a lot about leadership, and real leadership emerges and presents itself. And I've followed a couple of leaders during this time that have really inspired me as a leader and just inspired me personally. I think both our governor and the mayor of Anchorage have done an excellent job of being out in front and leading the way during this time. But one of the leaders and people that I've admired the most, that I've thought has done an excellent job of just showing good leadership in this time of difficulty and crisis, and being clear and concise and factual, and just been really incredible, has been Dr. Zink. And I sent an email last week, not knowing if someone as busy as her would ever have a chance to do this, but I invited her to join our morning coffee. And here she is. Dr. Zink has joined us this morning on STrEAM's morning coffee. So we're all really, really excited. Welcome, Dr. Zink. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're super, super excited to have you on.
Thank you, Adam. It's great to be here. I couldn't turn down a chance to talk to a bunch of educators and people and have morning coffee. So thanks for the opportunity. And just the work that Alaskans have done has just been tremendous with this. And it's really going to take all of us figuring out this path forward together. So I'm always excited to talk to fellow Alaskans who are really doing the hard work of this pandemic and figuring out a path forward together. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. I have a lot of questions, and I'm sure that some of our staff and parents who are on will have questions for you as well. I think the big question I have is, we talked so much about flattening the curve, and I really had the sense, like I said, that our leadership was out in front of this from the beginning. And as an Alaskan, as a lifelong Alaskan and an Alaskan educator, I'm so proud. I'm so proud of that, and proud of our leadership and proud of our state for getting out in front of this from the beginning. So my question to you is, do you think we're over the hump? Do you think we've flattened the curve and that we're starting to come out the other side?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Our case counts have definitely gone down. Our active cases have been down for about a month now. We've been consistently what we call the R0 value, the number of people that one person would spread the disease to, has been hovering underneath 1 for about a month, which has been great. So we didn't actually really ever go through a huge peak. We never had our hospitals overwhelmed. We didn't have a huge spread. I think that the real challenge is now, how do we get into this like steady state where we can maintain this for a long time, knowing that the pandemic isn't over? And as we learn more things about the disease, I was reading an article this morning just on some other ways that children may be more affected than we initially realized. Like, we learn new things about this disease absolutely every day. And so how can we get back to as much normalcy as we possibly can without having people who are vulnerable be affected, without the long-term consequences of getting sick? We know that getting sick from all sorts of diseases can have all sorts of consequences. And making sure that we understand it, but we have lives, and people, we need to find ways to live as well. I think that the amount of information we've learned in just a couple months has been tremendous. The goal of flattening the curve was to really build up the healthcare infrastructure and not have her overwhelm it. We've really built up a lot of healthcare infrastructure, a lot of additional testing, PPE, hospital bed space, alternative care sites, ways to transport people back and forth. Like, there's a lot there. Could we handle if everyone in the state got it? No, that's just a lot of people. So people ask me, well, do we have enough to just let everything open? No one in the world does. And that's just the reality of it. And so how do we keep this at a slow simmer? How do we keep it kind of tapped down as much as possible without blowing the lid off? And how do we make sure that, Alaskans are educated to make decisions for yourselves and for ourselves to find ways to be safe and healthy as we learn more stuff about this disease absolutely every single day? You know, some people have worked in infrastructure that has had to stay open the whole time, grocery stores and, you know, firefighters and EMS personnel and healthcare workers. And we are finding ways to keep them safe, and what ways we can keep it lower. I will tell you, most of the cases that we're seeing outside of big urban areas right now are in congregate settings. So they're in long-term care facilities. They are in close and tight housing. They are in, migrant work camps. They are in meatpacking plants. They are in, when people live close together, you just have a much higher chance of spreading it really, really quickly. So we're really focusing on how do we really prevent these big outbreaks, but start to kind of open things up to allow people to move about and do your normal activities as safely as possible, but really kind of keep those big outbreaks at a minimum, make sure it stays out of our healthcare facilities, make sure that people can get treated, make sure the vulnerable are protected, and then just make sure we all understand as much as we possibly can about this disease so we can make the decisions that are needed to try to help stay as safe as we can as we get more information. People ask a lot of times, like, what's the long-term game? Yeah, I wish I had a crystal ball. It would be awesome, but I'm all out of those, and those aren't there. I think that the reality is like we are all in this together, learning every single day about this disease. I am amazed by science and the medical and scientific community's ability to come together. I was looking at some genetic mutations of this virus. It doesn't look like it's having like big genetic mutations, but it has these little tiny mutations that probably don't matter at all for the disease, but you can track, you know, where the cases came from. And we were looking like the Fairbanks data. It looks like all of Fairbanks's cases came from like 2 introductions because they all had the same strain. And so it's really interesting to watch kind of these patterns. And the more we learn about it, the more we can give like really the better advice we can give on this is how we can prevent it, but this is what we can do moving forward. So long answer to your question, but
a good one. Thank you.
Yeah.
You mentioned that the spread happens when people are packed closely together, gathered closely together. And so, my next question, I really want to ask about school in the fall, but first, I'd like to ask you about this summer. I commercial fished for 10 years. Howard Mosen, one of our teachers who's on today, you can wave, Howard. He's in a yurt like you, so we were inspired by that. I sent him a picture of you that you put on Twitter in your yurt, so that was pretty cool. Howard's a commercial fisherman, and I think people who aren't as familiar with commercial fishing might picture a few people out on a boat, but the reality is there are hundreds, if not thousands, of workers on processors and in canneries and in those facilities. So what kind of projections do you have about how this might change over the summer with the influx possibly of tourism and with the start of commercial fishing? People really, packed tightly together for those things.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. So we watch this wave and you asked, are we over the curve? I mean, to me, the curve is the summer and everyone coming in and what that's going to look like. And then I worry a lot about what that means for the fall when we're all in closer settings, when we have other respiratory illnesses like influenza on top of it, and when our system could get very overwhelmed all at once. I mean, that's a lot of where my worry of the peak, comes to. You bring up some great points about fishing. We have been in close conversation with, I was just on the phone with Trident right before this, and the federal government and many of the communities to see what this looks like. Mandate 17 is really over the small vessels and using some of the old maritime laws to try to use that to try to help prevent. It's been fascinating how much the maritime laws help. Like that was really the way that disease was introduced in countries around the world for hundreds of years, was because of travel. And so the maritime laws are like super robust to minimize infection versus like airlines. They just haven't had to adapt during this world of infection. So the maritime laws have been very helpful for that. We are securing a significant increase in testing. Again, we don't think that a test-based strategy is superior to a quarantine-based strategy. So 14-day quarantine is better. But if you can do a 14-day quarantine with a test at the end of it to make sure you don't miss an asymptomatic person, that's kind of the best combination that we have right now to minimize the introduction. And again, the prevention of moving a COVID positive patient into a congregate setting, be it a fishing vessel or a processing plant or an H&G spot or a rural community is really where it's at. Like if you can prevent it entering there, you can really save a lot of spread quickly. So we are working with many of the canneries and processors about what ways they can quarantine and test, and then what ways can we do ongoing screening and testing on site. on the phone with the national lab director yesterday talking about the Cepheid machine. I'm like, have you tested it on a boat? Can we put it on a boat? Like, can I bring it around? They're like, no, you can't do it on a boat. I'm like, okay, how else can we move this forward? So yeah, we're working on that to be able to really think a lot about the fishing. Right now, there is the mandate in place through May 20th to require a 14-day quarantine if you come into the state. And so for tourism, that definitely affects that quite a bit. It doesn't say you can't come in. Hawaii has been even more aggressive and has been looking at ways to really actively monitor people when they're coming into the state. And it's a fine balance. You know, a lot of people come to the state in the summer, and what does that look like? But that is definitely our big risk right now. We've really tamped down the cases here in the state, but this world pandemic is far from being over.
Thank you. That's an interesting perspective for sure, and gives us a lot more to think about for how this summer might play out. And that kind of brings me to the next question that I alluded to, which everyone here is probably, you know, most curious about, which is what do you think this will look like? And I know I'm asking you to make a guess, and it's hard, but I know you also have a lot of data and projections, and I'm sure you're running these scenarios and discussing this. What do you think it might look like in the fall? How might this, you know, depending on how the summer plays out and what you just described, how might that impact returning to life as normal in the fall? And of course, for all of us, you know, that we're most eager to be able to return to school and be with kids and be in our buildings again. Yet, you know, we know that in Anchorage, that may mean, you know, we have schools with 2,000 students in them. So that means a large gathering of people in some cases.
Yeah, my kids miss you all. I think kids are missing their teachers are missing the kids. It's just, school is not only critically important for education and for learning, but socialization, also allowing workers to go to work. You know, there are many huge functions of why school is critically important. In some ways, I am somewhat grateful that our school season naturally ended-ish in May rather than, you know, July, like some other, you know, states where they're really kind of grappling with this much further. What we're doing, what we're talking to Commissioner Johnson about is creating this like 3-pattern model where we look at if there's high risk, medium risk, or low risk, and how much mitigation that we need. And that follows really the CDC guidance of those 3 models. And then he's looking at it in terms of like classroom, or 3 categories that he felt like were really important for schools. But classroom was one of them. That was one I was most focused on. And one was, I think, like kind of administrative and something else. And that different communities may be able to pick kind of different levels of mitigation. So say there's a lot of community spread in your community, we might have to be kind of high risk in general, and it might be really kind of what we've been doing. How can we use teleeducation to support the majority of people? I think there's a lot of concern about kids who are just really vulnerable at home, may not have a good home situation. What ways we can maybe have them be coming in while everyone else is teleeducating for if we've got high risk. But then if we've got low or medium risk, what other ways do you mitigate that? So for kind of lower risk, are you doing just, you're not mixing between classrooms, you're not having the 4th graders go read to the 2nd graders, you know, like you're keeping them separate so that you're not mixing as much. What ways can you keep groups small and static? And then if it's kind of that medium risk, do you do something like vulnerable kids come on Monday, and then you have so that the place is the cleanest it possibly can be, and then you separate your kids into like A and B schedules. So like the A group comes Tuesday and Wednesday, and the B group comes Thursday, Friday, and then they do education the rest of the days at home. So there's a lot of different conversations about what that looks like. And my guess is that we're going to have to be different in different parts around the state as well. That there will be some communities that may just be a really high risk community, but they only have 10 kids in their school. And so having them all in the same classroom isn't going to be the same risk when they're all living with each other anyway, versus you mentioned Anchorage and thousands of kids being there. Different schools have different connectivity. Different kids can handle connectivity in different ways. Different ages can handle it differently as well. And so what ways can we kind of do a tiered strategy? I think the more that we can find ways to be able to normalize this new normal and have kids who can be learning remotely, do that remotely, the better off we're going to be. Because then we can really use that time and that need of mixing. I think of mixing almost now as like this finite resource that we used to take for granted. And now that finite resource of like hugs and mixing and being together is just limited. And so how do we use that for the most good? And how do we really put the people who really need that face-to-face connection and have that, and those who don't need it, be able to do it in other ways to kind of protect those who are more vulnerable. So some thoughts like older kids potentially, so like Norway's doing, older kids are remote educating versus kindergartners are in person because they're not dealing so well with the Zoom world.
It's interesting. So really, there's not a one size fits all model, that just like the approach that has been taken with different communities and different measures and different, in different communities, you're looking at schools and school districts in different communities, depending on the risk and depending on where they're at, having different plans. The tiered model is an interesting thought for us to start to process through, that we could, I think a lot of us have been thinking in terms of, sort of a black or white, we'll go back to school or we won't. And it's interesting to think that it could be somewhere in the middle. And I'm it's a really interesting concept to stagger, or, the schedule and have students come on certain days. So I appreciate adding that layer of depth, complexity, but layer of depth to our thinking. I've been selfish and asked all the questions so far, and I could keep asking you questions for quite a while, but I'm not going to. I know your time is limited, so please let me know if we're getting up close to the time where you've got to step away. But if you have time, I'd like to allow a couple of our staff members or parents who are community members who are on to ask questions, if that's okay. Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. Mr. Mosen, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, thanks for being here, Dr. Zink.
And sorry, Howard, folks, when you ask Dr. Zink a question, just please introduce yourself and kind of tell her what your role is really quickly.
Yeah, my name's Howard Mosen, and I'm a teacher here at this small charter school, which I love. It's about 15 staff, 16 staff, and we can make changes a little bit faster than if we were 1,000 kids school. So I think we're really well equipped to deal with this coming September, but that's more of a statement than a question. Is I think we all need to figure out how to talk to our kids and our parents right now, because this is the time of year we get all excited about what's happening in September, getting ready for cross country running, get ready for the new year, the new grade. And just, I just want to put that out there, that I want to have a way to, have a real positive message even within the uncertainty. And that's why it's so nice to have you here, because we can start brainstorming things. But so just, that's all, that's where my head's at right now, is that as we're meeting the new kids coming in, new students coming in, and just, this is the year that we really, open our eyes and get all excited about, what's coming up. And it's hard not knowing. So that's all.
It is really hard not knowing, and I really appreciate you guys working with these kids. I mean, I feel like it's a generation that we haven't, that it's going to be really affected by this in all sorts of ways. And they are social little beings that are used to big groups and lots of people, and to suddenly disrupt their world so much. And it's hard for any of us to understand what COVID means, let alone if you're, a second grader, like that's a whole other world. Like, my daughter the other day was like, Mom, I'm ready for COVID to be over. Like, I'm done. I was like, hear ya, but we're not there yet, kid. But I think that there's so much resilience that we're seeing in kids and families and businesses, and finding ways to help them think about how to be resilient this summer and this fall, that this is an I mean, I've just been amazed at seeing businesses be like, okay, I can't do indoors. I'm taking my 10 spin classes and I'm 10 bikes and I'm going outside and we're 15 feet apart and I'm running it. Or kids being like, okay, I can't do this or that. Or my daughter's birthday, like everyone drew like through the yard with their like playing their instruments for her and holding up signs. And they're all 6 feet apart, but they found ways to like be connected. And all the schools that have been doing like amazing, drive-throughs and calls and pizza parties and all these other things to support kids. And yeah, I don't think my daughter really believed this was real until her boyfriend found out that his soccer practices were canceled. And suddenly, like, it really mattered. Like suddenly this was a big deal. And I think for kids, it's really true. So what ways can they do cross country, even if it's not like all hanging out beforehand together? Do you have your cross country groupings be only 2 to 3 people, and they're the ones who travel to an area and they're the group that runs together and they're not mixing with other groups? Can you put, online workouts and having everyone post their individual ones? They've been seeing a lot of Strava being used for exercise activities. So they'll put Strava challenges up and all the kids will go do the Strava challenge whenever they can before May 3rd. And then they look at each other's times and compete with each other to be able to do that. So what other ways can we find the essence of what's so important and valuable in our lives and make sure that we're continuing those things in as many ways as possible now and into the fall, so that we can stay happy and healthy and take care of each other.
Thank you. So Dr. Zink, our charter school has a 3-tiered focus. We focus on project-based learning, STEM, and outdoor experiential education. And so I think if we're able to ask a few more questions, they'll probably be around those focus areas that are so important to us. And a question from one of our teachers in the chat, Miss Goodman, who's a science teacher, and so helping prepare our students for to be future researchers and scientists and healthcare servants and all of those great things. She has a question about the outdoor piece of what we do, because it's so important to us at STrEAM Academy. We go outside every day. We learn outside every day. We use the community and our local environment for as much as we can. And Ms. Goodman asked, can you talk a little bit about the risk of contracting the virus when interacting with others outside? And she's talking about passing people on the trail or playing games outside, biking, or doing the kind of stuff we do, measuring trees and distances between trees and that type of thing.
Yeah, so outside is definitely less risk than inside. It's not a panacea. It's not perfect. It's not that it can't be spread outside. But really what we're looking at is air movement. So if you look at these studies where it looks at the micro droplets and air movement, if you're in a static room, it makes a big difference. There was an interesting study that came with just air condition and the way that in a static room kind of blowing could really spread it around like a restaurant space, versus if you're outside and those particles can move. This has been a time-tested process, like for tuberculosis. So I worked in Bhutan for a while, and you couldn't have the ability to make a really fancy hospital with a negative pressure room. So instead, you tried to make sure that the inside air movement matched the outside air movement, and you had direct sunlight as an ultraviolet. And it's basically for tuberculosis as effective to have that ultraviolet light in combination with air movement like outside to minimize the risk of tuberculosis. And that's how we set up our emergency department, was to use those things, because we couldn't afford all these big fancy tools. So the more that your kids can be outside, the more you're going to be replicating kind of these medical grade negative pressure rooms, because it's moving air really well. And so, yeah, thinking a lot about outside. We've been talking about camps for the summer, things like that. Do them outside. Having everyone like hug each other in a treehouse outside is not going to be quite as good. But like spreading apart, measuring trees is awesome. So using some of that same social distancing aspect. Lots of questions about trails all the time. And I wish I had a perfect answer. I mean, it's great seeing everyone out and about right now because everyone's there. The other thing to just keep in mind is when people are singing or coughing or exercising or exhaling, their micro droplets move further. And so there's one Belgian study that showed like 27 feet. There's a really sad case out of Washington where a bunch of people came together for a singing competition or singing gathering right at the beginning of this, and they didn't hug, and they stayed 6 feet apart, and they washed their hands, and they sang as a part of rehearsal. And now like 60% of them have contracted COVID, and 2 people have died just from that one singing outbreak. So just, I think people are like, well, I'm 6 feet apart, it's fine. It really depends, like, where is that 6 feet apart, and what are you doing in those 6 feet apart, and how much is doing. So think about those things. Like if you're singing, if kids are screaming, if yell, like that should all be outside, like further apart from each other to help minimizing that. And then just coming in separated for reading or for like times that you need to be a little bit more. It's gonna be more challenging this winter. And that's part of what I'm, nervous about is it's cold here. And how are we gonna do that? But I think the more you can think about outside activities and small groups and distance, the safer we'll be.
That's great. We talk a lot about how good it is to get to be outdoors and get students outdoors, and how good it is for our health. But this brings a whole new meaning to being outdoors is good for your health. Really, it's an entirely different slant on that, and it really adds to that for us.
You look back at like the pandemics of like influenza and tuberculosis over the last 100 years, it was outdoor small classrooms. Like that's how school continued. because it's kind of this time and true way of trying to minimize particularly respiratory viruses and bacteria. So.
Awesome, thank you. Do we have time for maybe one or two more questions?
Yep, I got till 8:30, and then I got to call in with the Anchorage school, the Anchorage area.
Well, I guess we have time maybe for one last question. If anyone wants to ask the final question, make it a good one for Dr. Zink.
I have a question actually. If we do come back in the fall, so I would assume that we would be obviously promoting mask wearing, and like we were talking with Ms. Sylvia this morning, is that it is hard to, it is hard when especially when you're in your home, to be wearing, a mask, which I know that that's not a requirement, but would you have any recommendations to kind of promote that, especially for kids, teenagers that are really like, this is just, it's a hard thing, obviously, but just, do you have any suggestions how we could promote it throughout our community, really, not just for kids, but if we do come back in the fall and we need to be wearing masks, which I'm assuming that would be a good measure to take.
Yeah, masks are hard. The amount of politics over a mask is kind of fascinating to me, and just associate with it. So there is more and more evidence that and basically it doesn't necessarily protect you, it protects others. And so, and it's a hard concept, and they are annoying to wear, and they fog up your glasses, and they're not part of our culture at all. And in many other cultures, this is just normal. I spent last year again in Asia and other places, and that was just normal. Here, it's very abnormal and it's hard. I think the more that we can normalize it, the easier it's going to be. The more you can make it fun and creative. So my kids were like not super interested, but then when they got to figure out the design and make it themselves, suddenly they were more interested. I think that understanding the science behind it, I mean, there's a lot of misinformation out there in general, but understanding kind of those micro droplets and what that looks like can be helpful. Little kids, it's hard, so they're not recommended under the age of 2, partially for breathing and partially for choking and suffocation hazards. And it's important to realize that not everyone is going to be able to do it, just like not everyone can stay at home. And I think the more that we find ways to take care of each other, and they're not all going to be perfect, and some are going to sink between the nose, and some are going to fall off the head, and that's important. I think I would really love to see more in the education sphere where kids we're doing more to help normalize it and using social influencers. And this is a cultural change. There's some science behind it. And I think it's important science. And I think the more that we move forward together, but really the battle isn't scientific, the battle is cultural. And we don't fight cultural battles with data, just like everyone just entrenches further. We normalize it. We fight it by understanding what that looks like. And that's going to be really different in every community. And so that is a space where I would love to see the education world step into more. Everyone wants me to either mandate it or not mandate it, and it's not my decision, but that's only one part of it. If this becomes something that people want to do and they see a need to do it and it becomes normalized, then it's a much easier place to move forward. So I would love to get to a point where masks were normalized, but it's a huge cultural lift for us here.
Our school is committed to helping to normalize that. We're with you, Dr. Zink. Before you go, one last thing. With our school, we're a STEM school, and we talk all the time about, our dream is that we're helping to create future doctors and scientists and nurses and researchers and engineers. What would your last message be for our student, for those future, researchers and scientists who are going to go through and live through this experience and hopefully come out the other side helping to do what you're doing and to help make our world a better, safer place? What would your message be for our kids?
There you go. Did I lose you for a second? I hear you about messaging to students. It's a great question. I mean, I think that science is this kind of, public health does its best role if it's never seen. And that's really hard for teenagers and kids to see. And they want to see the big sports person or whatever's out there. I think people are seeing science in a way, both good and bad, that they hadn't ever seen before. And I do think that science is this incredible little superhero secret sauce of figuring out how to move forward in the world. And there's so many different ways that you can apply it. And if you love the outdoors, or if you love, community, if you want to think about city space, I mean, the amount of science that's needed right now and the ability to kind of find ways together, I just also find it an incredibly, it's going to be just more and more important as we move forward. And it's this really cool space to be working in right now because everyone's so connected. Like to see genomic studies being, uploaded in Germany and being instantly able to compare them to Alaska and then being able to look and see what's happening in New York is just really, really cool. I think science has the ability to kind of cross all these spaces in time in a way that few other do. But I would encourage your science kids to make sure that they are learning art and reading broadly and learning about the humanity of the world, because it's science, but science also has to apply to people, and being able to think broadly about both of those things. And the scientists who I see the most effective are the ones who are able to think broadly and not just narrowly. There's a great book called Range: Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World, and I think it just really highlights the importance of science, but then also thinking broadly and finding new ways to think of new connections and applying that. So I appreciate all your time and commitment to your kids and all that you guys are doing. And this has been a time of much change and flux, and it's got to be, I think it's hard for everyone, but it's, particularly those like you all who are caring for others, it is incredibly challenging. So thanks for your commitment and time. And I'm sorry that I have to go, but it's great to see new faces and hear great new questions. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on today, Dr. Zink. We really, really appreciate it. I hope you know that you really are a hero to us. You're a hero to Alaskans. We're all watching you. We're all following you. When I told our staff and folks that you might be able to come on, it was the most excitement we've had in a long time. So we just so much appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks. And I'm just one small person. We're all in this together. So thank you guys. I appreciate your time. Have a good day.
Thank you, Dr. Zink.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Science is a superhero secret sauce. I think that was my takeaway from what she said when I asked what to pass on to kids. That was really cool.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I didn't advertise it better that she was coming on, but I never, and she's so busy. I was amazed she responded in the first place and said, yeah, I'll pop on. What day? And so I said, well, can you come on Tuesday? Here's the link. And I never got a confirmation, and I didn't want to bother her, but I eventually, last week I sent, Thursday or Friday, I sent an email asking, can you confirm that you're going to be on? And of course, super, super busy. She didn't respond. So I didn't want to put out to the whole world, we have the most amazing guest, and, and then not have her show because things got crazy. So I was a little surprised when she popped on this morning, and I wished I could have advertised it a little better, but you guys got the special treat, those of you that joined us. So people like Nikki and Heather, who have been joining us regularly, for all of our coffees, got a reward today. And of course, anyone else who, wants to see Dr. Zink, it's on YouTube and you'll be able to go grab it. So that was so much excitement for me. I'm going to take about 30 seconds and step away and get a cup of coffee. Mrs. Beyondich, if you wouldn't mind taking over for a moment, you can talk about things that are coming up, but also maybe if you'd like, you can introduce our next very special, equally important, equally awesome guest, who's going to talk to us about something else totally different, but just as cool.
This is a tough act to follow, and I'm so sorry, Jen, that you have to follow this act. But a couple days ago, we talked about the importance of online registration and getting that done for your school. And so as many of you can tell, I'm at the school right now, and we're closing up the school year, but we're not closed. So the Anchorage STREAM Academy is not a building, it's a school, and we're still operating from distance ed. So I want to make sure we let our kids know that they still need to stay engaged through the end of the school year. And we're having our wacky Wednesday workouts and our all school fitness Fridays that Mr. Mosen is putting on for us. And so keep checking into that. In line with online registration, oh, good job, Connor. In line with online registration, one of the new aspects of online registration this year are the 3 questions that help the migrant ed department learn if you might qualify for migrant ed assistance. And it's a super important aspect of our school that school system that's underused, I think. And so these questions are super important. And here to talk to us today is Jen Mickelson. Jen is also on our academic policy committee and has been an active volunteer for Anchorage STrEAM Academy for years and years now. So Jen, welcome to our presentation, and you are now co-host. If you need to share, you may.
All right. Well, thank you for inviting me to speak, and I just want to show a little bit more puppy love, just really quick. This is Gibbs. He's 9 weeks old, I think today, or close to today. So anyway, so I'm going to put him down, and he's going to whine, and you might hear him in the background. So I had a little bit about me. I've been with the Anchorage School District for this is my 11th year, and I have mostly been school-based, primarily at Baggett's Middle School, doing family school services coordination, which is a fancy name that the school district gave social worker positions in Title I schools. But the opportunity came up last spring for me to accept a position in the migrant ed department. And I thought, wow, this is really cool, but I don't know what migrant ed is. I've never heard of migrant ed. I didn't realize we had a migrant ed. What do you do? All of these questions. And the director at that time was like, that's exactly why we are expanding and doing, we're a very little known federal program. We're federally mandated program. It's a Title I-C program. So it falls under Title I, but it's a subdivision of Title I funding. And the Anchorage School District has a huge population of students that qualify for migrant education support funding. And so one of the things that we've been trying to do this year is sort of get all of our ducks in a row so that we can be more visible in our district, so our parents and our staff know more about who we are and what we do. And we can also sort of increase our enrollment of students who qualify in the migrant program. So part of what we're really trying to do starting this spring is an awareness campaign. And we had some things really planned about going to schools and doing all this stuff. And then this happened. And so now we're trying to figure out what we can do because we're just so not known about what we are or who qualifies and things like that. And we feel like there's a huge amount of students who qualify for migrant education support, but their parents don't know about it, and thus we can't get them qualified. So I have a little, let me see, where's my mouse? I have a little thing, a little PowerPoint sort of thing. And I don't know if I share this, if I do it as a slideshow, can you guys, let me see. Can you see that? Okay, all right. All of a sudden everyone got really silent. Okay, so ASD Migrant Education, in the past, the only time we ever asked parents if they qualified for migrant education is when you initially enroll your student in ASD, so like in kindergarten or first grade, or you were transferring your student into ASD. And starting this year, we're going to actually ask some prelim questions every year as you register your student online so that we can see, because maybe when your child was 5 years old, you didn't do some of the activities that qualify for the migrant education program, but now 5 years or 10 years later, you do. And we would never have known it. So what is migrant education? Migrant education is a federal program that assists states in supporting high quality and comprehensive educational programs and services during the school year and as applicable during the summer or intersession periods that address the unique educational needs of migratory children. Now, when you talk about migratory children in the lower 48, you're mainly talking about agricultural workers who move from sort of state to state or region to region to help with planting and harvesting and things like that. In Alaska, it's not quite that. In Alaska, it really centers around things like fishing and logging and subsistence berry picking, and there is an agricultural component, which I'll get to in just a second. Let's talk about what does ASD Migrant Education Program offer. Automatically, if you qualify for the Migrant Education Program, all students get free lunch and breakfast, no matter what school they go to or anything like that. Now, I know with STrEAM Academy, you guys don't have a lunch program, but it is something that we could figure out, maybe something to help with the migrant students who need lunch every day. You also qualify for swim lessons. All migratory children get, I think it's $4 a lesson is what the price comes out to be, swim lessons, and there's 4 sessions a year that you can sign up for. We also offer free life vests to all students so that if they're going out fishing in the summer or spring or fall, you can get a free life vest. We do free book distribution throughout the year. Just last month, right as we were going into the closure, we offered every student could pick out $65 worth of books online at Barnes & Noble, and it would get shipped to their house. And Migrant Ed paid for that. So they got $65 worth of books. We had almost 800 students sign up to do that. We do a winter clothing, winter gear outfitting in the fall every year. We offer school supplies for any migrant student, any kind of school supplies. We do health and wellness programs for migrant students and their families. We provide social services support. Like right now, we're in the process of supporting some of our families through doing some food, gift cards and some things like that, so that during this time when maybe they're unemployed or things are getting tough, they have some means. We also have a parent advisory committee that directs some of our programming at ASD. For the elementary school students, we offer tutoring and several different types of tutoring and opportunities. We have 2, and hopefully in the fall we'll have 3 designated preschools that are nothing but migratory eligible children. We do summer camps in the summer. We have in-service day programs. That's both for elementary and middle school. We do a little bit of high school, like this year we did 2 in-service days at the museum for high school students who needed some volunteer hours and things like that. In the summer, we're getting ready for our summer workbook distribution. We provide a skills stuff for elementary school students to use in the summer. We do, I have that twice, in-service day programs, and then we do a plethora of family events throughout the year for all of our students. At the secondary level, most of our larger schools have a student success coach embedded both at the high school and the middle school to work with our students and families. We also do a lot of out-of-school youth support. We help with AP exam fees. We help with school supplies and equipment, and that can be anything from your gym shoes or gym t-shirt to calculator, scientific calculator, or whatever. We provide credit recovery opportunities for high school students. We provide summer school opportunities. We have a very specific summer school opportunity for migrant ed students every summer. We also do tutoring. And at West High School, we have a designated counselor for students there. Now, who's eligible for migrant? So to be eligible for the migrant education program, a child needs to be under 20 years of age or under 22 years of age with an active IEP on file or hasn't graduated yet. And then sort of the checklist that we have is in the past 3 years, have your family participated, as a family, participated in subsistence fishing, commercial fishing, cannery work, subsistence berry picking, logging, or other agricultural or farm work. And And then, but there's a caveat to that. You have to, like, you can't live in Anchorage and fish at Ship Creek to qualify. Even though you're filling your freezer, you have to go outside of the school district, and you and the child have to have stayed over the course of a whole year at least 7 nights. So if you go down dip netting in Kenai for 3 nights, that would be 3 nights. If you go up north and berry pick and camp for 2 days, that would be 5 nights. If you headed to Homer and did some fishing there for a couple of nights, then you have 7 in a calendar year. So that's, and your child has to go with you. So, so if the dad goes commercial fishing, that's great. They go to Bristol Bay and they go fishing. But then the mom goes later in the year, later in the summer with all the children, then all the children qualify. If the dad just leaves and goes and comes back, then the children don't qualify. And then the other thing is the move must be due to the endeavor must be to an economic necessity. And we don't ask for income or anything like that. We don't ask for verifying income. Basically, a recruiter, if you think you qualify, a recruiter would call and interview you and just basically ask you, is fishing an economic necessity? And if you say yes, then we take your word for it. We don't ask you to prove it. Types of fishing, anything, commercial, set net, fish wheel, fish camp, dip netting, rod and reel, it doesn't really matter. There's almost 4,000. It's actually, as of last week, there was 3,993 students who qualified for the Migrant Education Program this year. This year, online registration will ask all parents or guardians 3 questions to see if your child might qualify for Migrant Ed. And this is what the screen looks like if you haven't done it already. And I don't know if you can see it real well, but it just asks you 3 questions. Within the past 3 years, has anyone in your family engaged in any of the following activities? That's that list. Includes clamming and shrimping, subsistence fishing, commercial fishing. Now, if you answer no to that, you don't answer the rest of the questions. You just go on with your online registration. But if you answered yes, then did any activity require staying overnight away from your residence and outside the Anchorage School District? And then you fill in your name and number and your students' names. And then what happens is one of our recruiting staff will give you a call and interview you and ask a little bit more in-depth clarifying questions about that go through these 3 questions. And then if you're deemed qualified, then you go to the state to be certified. I saw a raised hand. Nikki, go ahead.
Hi, Jen. After I filled this in, I was just thinking as you've been talking that if there was a little bit more clarification, I think that it would save some of the time, because I was like, well, yeah, we do go berry picking and we are staying overnight. Obviously it's not a subsistence situation, which when you're reading it, you're kind of like, okay, commercial. So I just thought with maybe some clarification that it would save some of your, the people who reach out to the parents some time, just because I kept kind of going back and forth, because I was like, is it meaning, and I understand the purpose behind it. So in my own mind, I got that this didn't pertain to our family. But I just think for some families, I think that could be just a little bit confusing, because it's, because we are Alaskans and we are away for extended amounts of times fishing and berry picking, and these are things that most of us kind of do during the summer. So anyway, just my 2 cents. But thank you.
And we had to, we started this process last July just to get these 3 questions in the online registration. It got approved in February. And the hoops that it had to go through, not only with ASD, but also with the state Migrant Ed program, there are just some things that we're not allowed to ask or to say until a recruiter does it. And so this is like the best happy medium. Every party involved is happy with it, right? And quite frankly, like when we say an economic necessity, that literally the state has kept that, and the federal government has kept that very broad. There is no income verification, and it's okay. Like there are some families that were like, well, you know, we could get by if we didn't fish, or we could get by if we didn't pick berries, but it is something that we do every year. And we make a point of doing it. We do camp and we do this. My personal belief is like, if you didn't have that fish in your freezer, if you didn't have those berries in your freezer, and you would then end up having to incorporate that when you ate those, you know, in your food budget, and it would make things tighter or uncomfortable, or you'd have to give things up. Well, guess what? That is an economic necessity, and no one is judging. Like we've had, I guess, because this is my first year, right? But we have had some, you know, a lot of conflict where there are some years a family goes commercial fishing and it's an amazing year, right? And they're living in a really nice house, and they're, you know, doing really great things, and they're taking their family on vacation. And one would say, well, that's not an economic success, like necessity. I'm like, come on, like 2 years from now, it could be a really lousy year. Like potentially this year could be a really lousy year for fishing, right? And it doesn't matter. This is your way of life. This is the way you know you do it. That's the reason why there's no income verification for the question of economic necessity. And how you answer that is up to you, right? And so there's no one that's going to question your definition of economic necessity, just to let you know. So, and teachers, to let you guys know as you talk with students or families who may qualify for that extra support. We're constantly throughout the year recruiting, and eligibility lasts for 3 years. So if you, in a calendar year, you have to have gone and done this for 7 nights, stayed overnight for 7 nights, but then your eligibility lasts for 3 years. So even if you don't fish and berry pick or any of those shrimp or crab or clam for a year, you still have, you know, this 36 months window of opportunity of qualification. But let's say you skip a year, like last year you couldn't go fishing because of the fires and all this other stuff, but then this year you go, then, you know, so then you would just extend your eligibility out again for 2 years, and it would just keep going until your child graduates, and things like that. And there are, you know, relationally, we're doing a lot with our students and our families. It's hard to quantify and just put on a list of what's the benefits of being part of the program. There are some financial benefits, like, you know, outfitting your kid with winter gear, or where do I unshare my screen? Over here, stop share. You know, those things can, you know, that kind of stuff can really add up. But there's also a lot of relational opportunities, especially on the secondary level for your students that support them and encourage them and mentor them. That is a really amazing thing that we've put into place in our district as well. Any other questions or comments, concerns?
So I do have another question. Sorry, this is Nikki.
No, it's okay. Don't say sorry.
So my other question is, so does it also pertain to like mining? Because like my husband has a mining claim that's, you know, on the Seward Highway. And so we are out there for extended amounts of time, you know, in the summertime. So
at this point, only logging qualifies, and it has to be commercial logging. Both subsistence hunting and mining have been brought up on the federal level, but about every 2 or 3 years they bring it up in this big meeting, and it just hasn't passed. There is quite a bit of a coalition in the Northwest that is really trying and pushing for those two things, but as of right now they do not qualify, no. So
thank you, Jen.
So Jen,
no problem.
If our family was away from our home, traveled to some extent, to gather, do subsistence, which just means putting food in the freezer, putting food away for our family for a total of 7 days in a calendar year. That's basically it, right? We qualify.
That's basically it. And you can, in good conscience, you say it's an economic necessity, because that question will be asked by you, by a recruiter.
And I think that's, I've been involved with and aware of Migrant Ed for a long time. And, I worked in rural Alaska, and Migrant Ed was a really important part of what we did there. And I personally, and you can, you're the expert. So, but I personally have felt for a long time that probably the biggest misconception is that it is income based. And I have heard so many times over the years, people, I would say, well, you probably qualify for Migrant Ed, and there's all these amazing, you did a great job of going through, there's such an amazing wealth of resources available. And it seems like I've heard thousands of times over 20 years of doing this, when I talk about Migrant Ed, people say, well, we wouldn't qualify, we make too much money. And I think people sort of equate it to like free and reduced lunch, to where there's a set income level and you have to kind of provide some proof of that. And I'm glad that you've reinforced that's just not true. And the economic necessity, regardless of the income of my household, I know that putting moose and caribou and salmon away is definitely super important. It is an economic necessity, because it makes all of our lives, that much more livable and manageable. So, economic necessity is a sort of a broad term. And I think if it's important to your family to put food away and supplement what you have to spend at the store, that makes it an economic necessity.
Yeah. So, and the other thing too is if you don't go as a family, but say you have a son or a daughter who goes with auntie or uncle to fish camp, that qualifies as well. It's about the child going and doing that. Or if you have a high school student who goes by themselves and works on a boat in Bristol Bay for the summer, that again also qualifies.
That is exactly how my family qualified for a long time. My son is in his 20s now and out of the house, but when he was a teenager, his grandparents are from Bristol Bay, and he would go to Bristol Bay every summer without me after I stopped fishing, to both subsistence and commercial fish. And just based on that, that's all I would tell the recruiter. My son was in Bristol Bay for 2 weeks, commercial fish, brought home salmon, brought home smoked salmon. Bam, we qualified every year because of that exact thing. So, that's my second takeaway on Migrant Ed. One, that people think it's income based, and really it's not. And two, my second takeaway on Migrant Ed has always been, that of the people that qualify, the people who you get qualified and get in Migrant Ed are probably 10% of the people who would actually qualify if they followed this and kind of looked under the hood a little bit. So my hope is to work with you, and for STrEaM to work with you, and we can do some messaging and continue to coordinate and get a lot more families, STrEaM families, but any families, of course.
Last school year you had 12 students at STrEaM Academy who qualified for Migrant Ed. Next year, I would love to do a more regular outreach to those students, like probably at lunch or after school on one of those days, where either myself or one of my middle school SSCs actually comes and meets with those students on a monthly or weekly basis, just to check in with them. But we've gone through so many changes this year. It's just been really hard to solidify some of the charter and smaller middle schools, especially. We are hoping to add some school-based personnel in our elementary schools as well in the fall, but we're having trouble. I hate to cut this short, but I have another meeting at 9 o'clock that I have to get to. But please feel free to email or call me or talk to Sylvia, and she'll hook me in and loop me in any way that she can. But if teachers could also, as a lot of times, we get referrals because teachers start talking with a family because the student really needs some extra academic support and they're trying to figure it out. And, the conversation comes up, well, we left early, the school year early last year because we had to go prepare fish camp. And it's like, oh, or we came late. And it's like, oh, you might, and we really do, students who aren't at grade level, they're called PFS, they're priority for service. And we target a lot of our services towards those students very specifically throughout the school year. And as this new format for migrant ed grows in this district, there'll be more and more sort of middle school emphasis on supports and help for our students at this level. So I'm pretty excited, and I'm very excited that I get to work like with middle school and high school students, and so hopefully. But I got a director who's going to be like, why were you late? So I got to go.
Thank you so much, Jen. We really appreciate it. That was awesome. That was great.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
That was Jen Mickelson, Migrant Ed Manager and APC member of the STrEAM Academy Board. What a morning coffee today. Wow. That was awesome. We had Dr. Zinc on, and we had Jen Mickelson presenting on Migrant Ed, and I can't believe it's already after 9 o'clock. Our morning coffees just keep getting better. I want to finish off morning coffee today by thanking everyone who's able to join us on Zoom and those watching on YouTube. It is Teacher Appreciation Week, and so I want to end by saying our teachers are the best teachers in the world, and we appreciate them so much.